Welcome back to another episode of the Blacklist Podcast. Today, we are thrilled to have Jonathan Field, a transformational speaker, recovery and mental health advocate, and a skilled profit coach. Jonathan's journey is nothing short of remarkable, having achieved 13 years of sobriety after navigating through 2 decades of addiction and time spent in prison. Today, he uses his profound experiences and insights to inspire and guide others in both personal recovery and professional success. Join us as we delve into Jonathan's incredible story of transformation, his approach to helping others, and the impactful lessons he has learned along the way. This episode, along with a host of other inspiring stories, can be found at theblacklistpodcast.com. Without further delay, Jonathan Field. Joining us all the way from South Carolina, ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan Field.
Hello.
What's going on, brother?
Good to be here.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I'm trying to remember. You reached out to us, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did you find out about us, if you don't mind me asking?
I believe that I was looking at this one influencer. I was on her podcast, and I was just going through looking at, honestly, at people pages she liked. And, I have a story that I want to share with people. I'm not trying to sell anything. I have nothing to sell. I just want to help people. And so I saw that you guys have a podcast. And, I reached out, let you know that I have a pretty crazy story of adversity that I've overcome. And just want to give people hope that could be struggling with hopelessness.
Was it Jamie Tall?
It was Jamie Tall.
Yeah,
wow, you like...
Jamie's a good friend of mine, and we did a live together a couple weeks ago. Every Friday, we collaborate with other influencers, and so we did a live, and she was on, and she had said, she's like, yeah, I just got done with Jonathan Field. I was like, oh yeah, he's coming on in a couple weeks. So that's why when you said that, I was like, it's probably Jamie. But yeah, Jamie's a good friend of mine. She's been on twice so far. Fun fact, Jamie was our very first guest that was ever on the show. So,
wow,
it was cool because when we did her episode, it was a year later. So we were able to do it like, just to see a full circle.
Yeah. She's amazing.
Yeah. Jamie's cool. She's awesome. So,
she's grinding. She's a hard worker. That's for sure.
Absolutely. No, that's cool. I always like to see how people hear about us. Like I'm realizing more and more now, like, sometimes it's just somebody through another influencer, or sometimes they're just scrolling. Like when I find guests, it's more of, I'm just looking at reels, or I'm looking at, TikToks or something. And I see some content and I'm like, okay, I like this. Then I start looking into their history. And so then I end up reaching out. So that's generally, I'd say about 80% how I find guests is 80% through just coming across them on social media. And then the other 20 is being referred to me through other people that have been on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on. I know when you reached out, I read what you had sent in there, and I was like, man, this guy's got a powerful story. So that's what we're about, man. We're about just sharing, hope and positivity, and just showing other people that if you and I can overcome what we've went through in our personal lives through our addictions and whatnot, then they can do it. So let's hop in. Like, what was like your childhood like? Kind of how did everything start?
Man, one of the first things that happened to me when I was little, 3 years old, I was introduced to pornography. So hardcore pornography. So my sex drive woke up at 3 years old. So I was a little 3-4 year old. I was 4 years old trying to have sex for the first time with one of my parents' friends. I was 4, she was 3. We kept getting caught. Until finally we were able to, break away into a bathroom and not get caught this time. And we went at it. I just didn't know the mechanics of it, So if I would have known the exact mechanics and everything like that, then I would have been successful at that at a very young age. So from a young age, I was obsessed with sex. Kids at that age should not be childhood should be like innocence should be protected. But I grew up to a narcissistic mother, never admitted she's wrong. Father wasn't around, and I had a brother, Jacob, who was 3 years older than me, and he was like my hero, man. I tried to be with him and be just like him. And um, at 17 years old, I dropped out of high school to go follow the Grateful Dead with him. And he taught me the ins and outs of selling drugs at the Grateful Dead and Fish concerts. And him and I at that age made a pact with each other. And he told me, because he had been traveling, he started traveling with Fish, and then he got into the Grateful Dead. And I went to a couple shows with him whenever he'd be in town. And this was when I lived in Tennessee, not far from Huntsville, Alabama. And when I started traveling with him, he said, Jonathan, here, a lot of kids think it's cool to shoot up heroin. He said, but don't ever let me catch you with a needle in your arm. He said, if I ever find out you have a needle in your arm, I'm going to knock you out. And if you ever hear that I have a needle in my arm, you do the same for me. And so we kind of had this pact with each other. And I started doing meth at 16. And we did meth all the time, following the Grateful Dead, of course, LSD and mushrooms and ecstasy and stuff like that. I was never really into cocaine at the time. But yeah, we would do meth. And then one night we were in San Francisco after Jerry Garcia died. And me, my brother Jacob, and probably about 10 other kids all went down to the beach. And we had got some meth, and we were smoking meth all night long. And honestly, man, we had a blast. We were running around on the beach, just acting like wild animals all night long. And the next morning we were on our way back into San Francisco. And I had found out that my brother, while we were running around on the beach, was in another van, and he had shot up for the first time, and he shot up meth. And, it was just him and me. We were on our way back into San Francisco, and I confronted him about it. And I said, man, we had a pact with each other. I said, I'm supposed to knock you out, man. I said, just get ready, because it's about to go down. And I remember he got so mad at me, man, just started flipping out on me. But I didn't want to fight my brother, man. I loved him. And I just remember started crying. And I said, dude, you're going to die. And it wasn't much longer, man. He ended up getting hooked on heroin. And to make a long story short, he ended up, after getting out of jail in Santa Cruz, California, he had split up from where I was and went out to California. And the night he got out of jail, he was in a hotel room with a bunch of other kids, and he ended up overdosing. His tolerance had went down while he was in jail. And he passed away the next day, man. And my life was like, it was crazy, because all my life I looked up to him. And I ended up getting clean. My brother, before he passed away, like, he went into a coma, but then he came out of it while he was in the hotel room. And the next night, while he was on life support, I met up with a bunch of people. They came and met me at the hospital. We flew out to Santa Cruz, and they were telling me that he was asking, when he came out of the blackout, the coma, he was asking them if they believed in God. And then he went back into a coma. And man, I just ended up becoming a Christian after that, because our whole lives we were taught about Jesus. We never went to church or anything like that, but I had been told that Jesus loves us. He paid for our sins. And also, whoever calls on his name, that he won't turn anybody away. Whoever turns to him, that he'll receive them. And so I just understood that there was this love that God had, even for somebody like my brother who passed away from a heroin overdose. And at that time, I ended up becoming a Christian right before I was 18 years old. But then I inherited some money when I was 19, and I ended up just falling back into drugs and prostitutes and smoking crack. And man, I hated crack, but I would sit there and smoke crack for nights until finally I would just come to, and I'd be like, what the heck am I doing, man? And then I'd quit. But then, I'd go through a stressful situation. This was when I lived in Florida. They didn't have meth in Florida. That was my drug of choice. But I just wanted to do something. The way that I dealt with my problems when I get stressed out, I would do drugs. And so crack happened to be the hardest, only thing out there. And even though I never enjoyed it, I sit there and blew thousands of dollars smoking crack. And yeah, man, that was my life for a while, man.
I never did crack before. I'll be honest with you. I never did meth. I never did crack. Like opiates, and downers were my thing. Crack was never my thing though. Like I couldn't think about getting paranoid and all that crap. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
they found, I didn't realize I had ADHD. And I've recently done a lot of studies, and people with ADHD do have different brains. It's measurable. And the thing about amphetamines, if you have ADHD, it kind of like clicks, and for my brain type, I hated downers, but whenever I would do meth, like to me, I thought for years it was like the miracle drug. I loved it,
yeah.
until it started destroying my life.
Yeah, I relate to you as far as the pornography goes. I was 8 when I was
Wow.
introduced to it. And it was by my stepfather at the time. He would. I mean, I was 8 when I was sexually, abused by adults and stuff. But like, I remember he would call like those 1-900 hotlines, and he'd call me over and he'd put the phone to my ear, and I'm listening to like have phone sex and stuff, and I'm just like, man, I'm 8 years old, and and this is by somebody who was supposed to be a parent to me. But it messed, man, it really did. It messed me up as an adult when it come to sex, like how I viewed women, and it turned me into a sex addict. And unfortunately, it really tainted my image on why sex was created, and whatnot. And people
Yeah.
don't get that being touched and stuff like that, and being introduced to that at such a young age, how it affects you as an adult. Like, you think that you're a kid, but it really screws you up as an adult.
Yeah. Yeah, it does, man. I was never like molested. But people that I'm very close to, um, were sexually assaulted when they were children. And the thing that's so messed up about it is from what I understand, is it's just so messed up because it's this thing that should not be happening. And it's very conflicting because part of it actually feels good, and so you're experiencing some sort of pleasure from this thing, and then it just screws with your head, man. It's a very high percentage of children that are sexually molested, man, and that's like, and we wonder why the world is like freaking out, and we wonder why people are having like meltdowns and breakdowns and flipping out in the Walmart and cussing people out and having road rage and stuff like that. It's all of those things when you're a child affect you, and really typically what you're seeing when you're seeing somebody acting out in public is they're being triggered. It's like they're back to that little child again, the victim. And for me, once I understood that, it helped me become a lot more patient with people in their failures and in their flaws, and when they're messed up and when they're misbehaving. It's not about me. They had things happen to them. We all grew up in this world that's not the way that it should be. And, all of us have these like triggers and trauma. And once I realized that, man, it helped me to be a lot more patient with people, less judgmental. And then also I was able to be a lot more patient with myself, and not so judgmental of myself, because for me, I could forgive just about anybody, for anything. And in fact, I have in my life, but I thought that it was okay to be extremely judgmental towards myself and just hate myself. And that was the final thing for me to do, man, is for me to learn to be patient and turn that same patience I have for other people onto myself. And because, yeah, man, we all have issues. And once I ended up getting hooked back on meth, and I ended up not being able to get off meth till I was 32 years old. So from the time I was 16 to 32, I had this obsession. Well, I had an obsession with sex my whole life. But then it eventually got to where sex and meth went hand in hand. And, 16 years I was hooked on meth, before I finally figured out how to get off of it. And, man, ever since I got rid of the meth, my life is still full of problems. I still have all kinds of issues. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still so far from where I want to be, but I knew I wanted a family, and the way I was living, man, I could never have a family until I got rid of the meth. So I still have a lot of problems, but now I guess that they're just normal problems. But yeah, all those years living that way, it still has a pull on my brain, man.
Right. What was it like the very first time that you did meth? Like, were you hooked instantly, or what? Like, how did do you remember that feeling?
The thing about meth for me is, yeah, I remember the exact day. I was 16 years old. My brother had took off and went on fish trap, touring with the fish. I was living in Arkansas, and my friend Brad and Danny, they were both my brother's friends. They were 3 years older than me. They showed up at my house with this pink crank, and we had been eating acid and stuff like that all the time, and they started chopping up lines in the on the dining room table, and we did meth. And dude, I loved it. I wouldn't say that I was hooked on it because you know doing meth, like as a kid, I never fiended for it. I would, like I said, I spoke about the cocaine. The cocaine was weird because whenever I would do cocaine, especially smoking crack and stuff like that, it's like I would get as high as the crack could get me, which just really didn't ever do anything for me. But for some reason, even though I didn't enjoy it, I had this like, it's like that addiction in the moment where you want to keep doing more until I would finally come to my senses. But meth for me, man, like honestly, for a while, like when I moved to Phoenix when I was like 21 years old, and I got my first door-to-door sales job selling newspapers, and I did telemarketing there, and I would I found my meth connection doing door to door sales. I could just read people and tell they were on it. And so it was a matter of time after living in Phoenix, before I found my connection. But then I would go party on the weekends because if I was doing a sales job, and if I stayed up all night long and then tried to go do sales over the phone to where I'm trying to be like mentally in control of the conversation, my brain would just be fried. Like without the sleep,
Mm.
I could function in like some sort of labor job or construction maybe, but like trying to be like communicate and stuff, it just didn't work for my brain. So I would walk around with meth in my pocket Monday through Thursday, or through Friday afternoon, and not do it all day long. It's like I wasn't like hooked on it. But to me, it just made everything better when I was on it. So, but it was for me, what I realized after I finally got clean is I determined that I was an addict because I kept falling back into it, because I kept doing it, it makes sense. That's what most people would classify an addict with. But I went around telling everybody, I can't stop. I'm a meth addict. I'm a sex addict. I mean, there were days where I was sleeping with like two or three women a day. Like that's all I did when I got married, had my first, with my ex-wife, and had my first son, named him after my brother. And when she ended up leaving, I just went into a dark hole because I was such a failure, and I wanted to provide this father figure to my son that I never had. And when that was over, my ex-wife told me it was all my fault, and I believed it. I know now it wasn't, but at the time when she said it was all my fault and she's leaving because of me, I felt like the biggest failure, and I went down such a dark path. The only thing I could do to deal with the pain was just do meth, man. Do meth and sleep with women. And that was my life for years, man. It's like, and I lived that way for a long time until I was finally able to quit, till I was finally able to stop. But one of the biggest for me, I have a problem with certain recovery groups that label themselves as addicts for the rest of their life, because for me to finally get clean, I know certain things work for some people, but for me, words are really powerful. And if I say I am anything, I mean, well, it's pretty much proven. Like if you say I am anything, you're setting your brain up to act like that thing that you say you are. So I had to stop saying I'm an addict. I had to stop saying I'm a sex addict. I had to stop saying I can't quit. And I had to start developing a vocabulary of power, and get all of these limiting statements out of my mouth and start believing that I could do it before I was actually able to. And once I stopped doing that and I replaced my vocabulary, and I learned how to walk by faith in something I couldn't see. And I started saying, I'm free. I'm not an addict anymore. God, you've set me free. Thank you. Saying that over and over and over again, it eventually just became my reality, man. And I found that's what it means to renew your mind. You have to learn to think a completely new way than what you've been thinking. And a lot of people are in addiction because they have a very low belief about themselves.
Mm. Yeah. Excuse me. It's funny that you brought that up about the verbiage because when with that Friday Night Live that I was telling you about, when our very first episode that we did, the topic was how long do we identify as addicts for? And that was a very, very good conversation because half of them were like, you know what? No, once I'm done, I'm done. I don't identify because I don't want to link myself to it. And then the other half was like, you know what? I believe that I am going to be an addict in recovery forever. It doesn't mean I'm going to be a piece of crap forever, but that's, and so I see both sides of it. And like you said, what worked for you may not work for somebody else and vice versa, but it makes
Absolutely
plenty of
right.
sense because, in our days in this day and age of recovery, there's so many back and forth with everybody, and there's too many people that it's just like, if you're not recovering their way, you're not truly sober, and blah blah blah. So, um, but I get it. Like I know, like when I got sober, I started going to Celebrate Recovery, and so for me, when I did that, of course, being faith based, when they introduced themselves, like hi, my name is Jared, and I'm a grateful believer. Instead of
Oh,
putting it
yeah.
with, I'm a
Mhm.
sex addict or an alcoholic or
Right.
this, that. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, no, it's very, very interesting because some people can say they're addicts for the rest of their life, and others, like such as yourself, you had to break free from that.
Yeah. For me, even beyond addiction, what I want to do is I want to root out any limiting belief I have about myself. I want to become the most powerful person that I can be. And I do believe that that humans were created in the image of God, and all of us have power to create our own realities, and we can take responsibility for where we are or where we're not. And it's not to condemn people. For me, it's like, for me, once I realize that I have a lot more authority and power in my life, then I can give up the victim thing and I can start to take responsibility for it. And then I'm not blaming anybody because the power is placed back into my hands. And I don't want to say I can't do anything, I just want to become a powerful person. And to become a powerful person, it's something that you become. I don't think it's necessarily something you have to attain to. I think that we're already powerful. Um, but, but yeah, I mean, really what it comes down to is if you believe this program that you're doing will work, then it will. And if you don't believe it will work, and if you don't believe that it has the power to help you get free,
Mhm.
I think there's many, many ways to skin a cat.
Absolutely.
If your ultimate goal is just to quit doing drugs, then you can make that your goal, but you can set your goal beyond just surviving, and you can set your goal to thriving. And I'm not there yet, but the train has left. I'm on my way and I'm thriving. Dude, I couldn't quit doing meth all my life. I couldn't stop. There were so many things I couldn't stop doing. And now God has blessed me, man, to where I lost my first family, and now I'm remarried. My wife and I have been married for 13 years. We have four children together. And God has taken me so far from where I was. And for me, I think it's important to get to the root of why you're doing drugs and just
Yep.
remove those. And for me, I think that I really am convinced that it's just a limiting belief that we have. We turn to drugs because we don't think we're strong enough to handle life on our own. We don't think we're good enough. It's like an unworthiness thing.
Yep.
I didn't feel worthy, man. And that is the type of thing. So I am still a recovering unworthy person. I'm still recovering out of being unworthy. I still struggle with that. I don't, dude, 5 years ago, I was targeted by the federal government. This was 9 years almost after I got clean. I'd started a business, family, bought a house, finally was a contributing member of society, was a leader in my church, and the federal government targeted me for conspiracy to commit wire and mail fraud. And I fought the government, lost, got sentenced to 5 years in prison. And all of that time, man, it's like God brought me through all of that. And God gave me this faith to believe that I can make it through anything. And while I was in federal prison, I was in a camp, man. We didn't even have a fence around the place. So meth was there everywhere. And probably 80% of the white dudes in prison, in federal prison where I was at, was on meth. And I could have done meth anytime. Like my next door neighbor, I was sandwiched in between on my aisle of bunks between two dudes on meth. And I could have done meth at any time. And I wasn't even tempted, which was amazing, bro, because when I was first quitting for the first couple of years, I was wondering, like, am I always going to like struggle with this? Am I always going to have this pull towards doing meth? And I can honestly say that I didn't, which was really cool for me. But you know what? I'm still like a recovering unworthy person. Every day, man, I still wake up when I go into a social situation because of all those years of believing that I wasn't worthy. I still like have to give myself pep talks. I'm like, all those years of feeling like I was a really unworthy piece of crap, man, I still like, my brain still kind of reverts to that. So in the sense of that, I'm in recovery for the rest of my life, but it's not necessarily for drugs. It's just in recovery from these limiting, weak beliefs that I had about myself. You know, I hated myself as a kid. And,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Think about it. You got to go back to why we start using to begin with, you know. And I'm big on hitting the nail on the head as far as treating the root. Okay, why did we start using? I know for me it was because being sexually abused at a young age, being introduced to that, growing up, seeing the my family, you know, do what they're doing, heavily involved in drug trafficking. You know, I watched my stepfather die in front of me at 13 years old, like all that. So that, you know, like that led me. So I started using to numb myself. And there's different reasons, you know, to why we use, but
and it's the conclusion. They say it's not
yeah,
necessarily the trauma, the act of what happened to you. It's the conclusion that you come to
yeah,
because of that act. And it's like what you came to believe about yourself when you were assaulted. It's like that lie that you end up believing that you're not worthy. And it's like life sucks too much. It's like the drugs actually kind of help you, because if it weren't for the drugs, what you believe and what you see is too painful to deal with.
yeah, yeah. So, you know, I think if somebody goes and they go and they get sober, they go get clean because their family wants them to do it. You know, at the end of the day, it's never going to last because we got to want it ourselves. But we have to be able to treat the root of it. It's most people going to prison, going to jail. You know, they get arrested, they get sent to jail just to do their time. You know, but they never treat the problem. Like they never get sent to, you know, start doing therapy, start doing, you know, rehab or whatever. I just think that we need to get back to the basics and starting to treat why we started using, because when we can start recognizing why we started using and we can learn how to manage that, then it can help us in our recovery long term.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. You know, I ultimately believe I've had people like you had mentioned that you did the episode on, you know, how long do I have to say I'm an addict? And I know I've made some posts on in different recovery groups, and that's always a really controversial thing. Some people are so like dogmatic about what they've been taught. And so I can definitely see why that is a controversial thing. But I mean, people have gotten mad at me when I say you know, it's because we believe we're weak. It's we believe that we're not good enough that we end up doing drugs. I've had people get mad and they're like, well, addicts are the strongest people. I said, yeah, I mean, I believe addicts are the strongest people. The problem is the addict themselves that are caught up in addiction don't believe that they can do it. They don't believe that they can stop. They don't think that life can be awesome. They don't think that they can truly be happy. They don't think that they're worthy of an amazing life and a fulfilled life. So it's like we just end up settling for something less than the best for us.
Right. What okay, so when did you feel when was like the worst of it in your life? Like when was your rock bottom? What was kind of decided for you just you needed to do something different?
Yeah. Jared, you know what's crazy about this question is once I had everything in my life and I had overcome the drug addiction 9 years clean and the federal government came after me and I lost and got sentenced to 5 years in prison away from my family. I had a 4 month old, I had a 6 month old, a 6 year old, and an 8 year old, and a wife who loved me. That sucked, but that was nothing compared to that was post. That was once I learned to have faith and walk by faith. Believe it or not, the worst time, though, the rock bottom for me was after my ex-wife left me. She said, "I'm leaving and it's all your fault." And I felt like the biggest failure in the world because I had fallen absolutely in love with my son. You know, when he was born, something woke up in me and I never knew that I could love like that. And it actually opened up my eyes a lot to the love of a father and that God loves all of us like a father. And it kind of opened up my eyes and let me know how God felt about me. And then when I lost that, the darkest part of my life was in that time, man, 2006 to 2008, man. That was a really hard time for me. My son was about 3 years old and I started getting in trouble. Ended up going to prison the first time, going to jail and prison. And man, I literally remember sitting in a car, my girlfriend's car that I had borrowed, crying like a baby because I had no love in my life. Like everybody had abandoned me. My mother had disowned me. I couldn't be with my son, who I love more than anybody. I had lost my brother, who I love more than anybody, to a heroin overdose. And then I had this little boy and fell in love with him, and now he's gone. And I literally had nobody in my life, man, that loved me. That was the worst, man. That was the worst. Just doing meth every day and having sex with every girl that I came across that would have sex with me.
Yeah. Yeah, man, like when it's crazy when we sit and we tell these stories back because we look at it and we're like, dang, like I can't believe that I did that, just to feed my addiction. Like sometimes I'm in awe. I amaze myself at like, wow, when I speak it out loud on the things that I've done, sleeping with different people and robbing people and stealing and this and that. And by the grace of God, I never got arrested and I've never been to prison. I should have, but I thankfully I never did. But
I think a lot of people should have, if you want to say that, a lot of people have broke the law, whether they've been caught
yeah,
or not.
right, right. So it's just insane. When you when you just tell these stories back and just to realize like the crap that we did. But all right, so what was your turning point? When was the last day that you ever used? What led up to that?
So, man, I was this Christian trying to get free from my drug addiction, and all the churches I went to, they didn't know what to do with me, and I was the guy that there was no hope for. And there's this pastor. Um, this was around the time that I met my wife now. When I moved to Greenville, South Carolina back in 2009, I had met my wife, and I had been clean for about a year. And the night that I met her, our first date, I ended up finding somebody and like relapse back on meth. The night I met her, and I had been telling her how I'd quit, and I'd been open about my life, but then now all of a sudden I'm like back on it. And so about a month into it, I told her about that. But I had learned about God's love, man. And once I realized and I saw in the Bible that God loves us with an everlasting love, and that I don't come to God, God doesn't accept me based on how good I've been. I didn't earn it, it was a free gift. And that nothing I could ever do could make him love me any less. Even though I couldn't stop doing the drugs, I quit. There was finally a point to where I would quit running from God. It used to be like I'd get high, I'd go sleep with a woman, and then I'd feel this shame on me, and it would make me like run away from God and not. But I just decided to come to God in all my mess, man. And so I would be on meth, listening to this preacher, this pastor. His name is Dan Moeller, and something about his preaching, man, like it was really amazing. And I had found out that he was going to do this school. Like this is a pastor that goes around preaching everywhere. He's never taken up an offering anywhere, and so he's not like one of those money preachers. But he would share all of these like supernatural experiences and like miracles, people getting healed, like people coming out of comas when he prayed for them. And so he started this school called the School of Kingdom Living. And he said, don't charge anybody. He said, just charge them enough money to where for the 10 weeks or 12 weeks of the school that you can, just pay to keep the lights on and stuff. So it was like $200. And I didn't even have the $200 then. And I reached out to them, and there wasn't a way for me to go. But then all of a sudden, this lady, Alana, who was like heading up doing the administrative part, she called me up. She said, hey, Jonathan, she said, I found a place for you to stay at. She said, if you can get up here to Pennsylvania, then you can come to the school. And so, man, I went up there and I sat under this pastor named this pastor, Dan Moeller. And honestly, the first week that I knew that I was changed, man. And I remember being on my way to the church, throwing my cigarettes out the window and quitting cigarettes. And so I don't remember the last time that I did meth. It was shortly before I went up there to Pennsylvania. But yeah, that was in 2010, the end of 2010.
Okay. And yeah, some people, they remember to the very last second, to the very last minute, and there's other people, they're just like yourself. I can't tell you exactly when, but it just all depends on that God moment that you have.
Yeah, well, the crazy thing about it is I ended up leaving my ex-wife or my current wife. Her and I were dating, and I was staying in her house, and she never did drugs. Her dad was a heroin addict at one point, but like drugs was never her thing. She saw how it destroyed people, and so she never had any desire to do that. But she was kind of enabling me, and I could go out and I could go do meth and come back to her house, and she would just let me come back anytime. And I was just like, man, I'm never gonna get off these drugs if I don't leave. Like, I know you love me, but I just have to leave. If I ever want to get clean, I gotta get out of here. So I left, man, not knowing whether or not I would ever come back to see her again. And when I went up there to Pennsylvania to this school that Dan Moeller was teaching, about, like I said, the first week I knew I was changed, and then I came back. But when I had left, I went to stay at my dad's house in Tennessee, and that whole time I was there at his house, um, I was trying to find meth. I just didn't have any connections out there. So, and when you're on meth, man, you're living on it every day. It's like you don't really, it's you don't really. It just kind of, for me at least, it just kind of got blended together.
Do you this, I asked this because this is different for everybody, and just because I've never done it. So do you withdraw from meth? Like, is there like a withdrawal like you would from like opiates?
Not like opiates. No, it's there's nothing that affects the brain, the dopamine system like meth, like what cocaine or sex may boost it a slight amount. Meth releases dopamine in your brain like times 1,000.
Yeah.
So like compared to any other drug, it doesn't really nothing affects your brain like meth. So um, you don't go through physical withdrawals like get sick and stuff like that. But it's like if you've been living on it for any period of time, 6 months, years. A lot of people have been on it for years every single day because you just got to do it every day if you want to, or if you don't do it, you just experience this crash. Like your brain ends up depending on the meth for the dopamine. So without that meth, man, the dopamine, the part of your brain that releases dopamine doesn't even work. So I will say that when I had quit, though I never experienced any kind of sickness, I was really tired for the first year. Like I lost my sex addict. I went from being like a freaking pervert on meth to where all I wanted to do is just be with a girl in a room, like having sex for all night long, to where, when I got clean, like I lost that, man. And it took me about a year for my brain to get right. But it was awesome, man, because it eventually got to where it's like, I loved life. But yeah, there's like a time now, unless God does something like miraculous to where, the brain, like I have heard of that to where people don't experience any of that stuff. For me, that wasn't my situation. It took me about a year for my brain to where I felt like a normal person, whatever that means.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they say, yeah, at least with opiates, I don't know what it is like for amphetamines, but they say, at least 6 months minimum to like for your receptors to reset, and that's why it's like 6 months to a year, to allow your brain to kind of get back to normal with all the levels and whatnot.
Yeah, especially with meth, man. Like I was talking to a lady, um, she's this master recovery specialist, and she has a YouTube channel called "Put the Shovel Down." And I sat down with her because she's in Greenville, where I live, and I told her, I said, the people I've found that I have the hardest time with getting off of the substance that's the hardest is like alcohol. And she said, really? She said, and she's been doing this for years. She said, I actually have a really good success rate with alcohol. She said, it's actually meth is the one that I see that messes people up the most. It affects the brain more than anything else. Like I said, they've said that 1,000 times, the dopamine receptors in your brain are like excreting 1,000 times the amount of what it normally would. So yeah, I would imagine that takes a while.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's fast forward. That's over. Of course, 9 years in, this whole federal stuff happened, and you don't have to go into detail or anything if you don't want to. But like, was this like something that was you were completely shocked to hear, or like how did that come about? Like, what were you feeling when you heard about it?
Absolutely shocked. It's kind of hard to explain how I felt about it, man, because I was in the middle of a fast. Our church does a 21-day fast every year. Um, and so I was like, when the feds came through, like January 18th of 2018, and they raided my store, um, I did not act like a normal person to where I was freaked out and scared and panicking. I was just so full of faith. I just laughed. I said, man, this is an attack from the devil. I'm going to come out on top of this. This is like so not true. Like they put me on the news, said that I had a fencing operation and that I was this crime lord, this drug,
So,
but
so
nothing.
none of this was true. None of this was actually true.
No, I mean, I started a business that's kind of like a pawn shop, and the drug addicts did figure out that we would buy just about everything. But I had an eBay business before I had a store, and it just kind of turned into that. Like I looked at it like, man, my business is growing. More and more people are coming to my business, but it basically became known as the place where you could just steal stuff and come take it to our store. And because we used eBay, we could sell everything a lot quicker. So when they came, um, there were some guys that got busted in my store selling some stuff to us. And this cop that was in there, he started accusing me, saying that I knew about it and everything like that. And I get into this like argument with this cop in my store, and he's trying to trip me up in my words. And I was just like, I could see that he was literally trying to like trip me up in my words and get me to say something. And I said, dude, you can say what you want. I said, but I didn't know that this stuff was stolen. Of course, it's a little shady. People come in and they've got brand new stuff, but it was the type of business I had, and I had just convinced myself that it was okay and it was normal. Um, but they wouldn't push for it to go state. If it was state, I would have beat it, man. The most they could have got me with was like receiving stolen goods. But then they pushed for it to go federal, like FBI. But the FBI wouldn't push it or touch it because it wasn't enough money. And so then the prosecutor says, well, this is the way we'll hit it. So it's like they created this crime and said it was wire and mail fraud. And nobody had ever gone to prison for what I was charged with. Nobody had ever lost. I was the first of its kind. But I just looked at it. It's like, I was like, man, it's crazy. They're just making this, they're just doing whatever they can to try to get me in trouble. I'm like, I'm going to beat this. I thought when you fought something, you know, I thought that I thought anytime you're fighting charges and you're taking it to trial, that they have to prove their case. But in the state, like if the state charges you with something, they actually have to have evidence. But there was no evidence in my business other than, yes, people sold stolen stuff to us, but there was no evidence that I colluded with anybody. There was no there were no phone calls or recordings. And I said, man, they'll never be able to come up with a phone call saying that I did this crime. They'll never be able to find video of somebody like undercover, because I would never ask somebody to go steal stuff. I'm like, no way I'm going to lose, because they have to prove their case. But that's not how it works in federal court, man. In federal court, testimony is considered evidence. So even if they have no proof, if a person comes in and says you did anything, that's considered evidence against you. So long story short, man, yeah, I lost. And there was one guy that got up on the stand that completely the most damning thing said about me was completely fabricated and made up. And I was just like, man, they're going to see through it. But no, that guy's testimony made me look like the biggest piece of crap on the planet, even though he fabricated it. And yeah, man, I lost. But was it a shock? Absolutely, man, because I wasn't trying to live, and I wasn't trying to break the law. Like, my store just kind of became it just kind of morphed into this thing to where it's like we bought whatever walked in, and then we would sell it on the shelves or on eBay. And I wasn't hiding anything. I had no secrets. So yeah, man, I thought I was really naive going into the trial. I was like, man, I got this. No way I'm going to lose this. But yeah, the jury found me guilty in 30 minutes. And my sentencing guidelines were 9 to 14 years, but the judge was merciful and he only gave me 5 years. So that's pretty crazy.
Has there ever been anything that has ever came back to show you actually you were innocent, you didn't do anything?
No, because it honestly took me losing the trial before I realized I was guilty. You know, I don't play like a victim. And it's a good thing because I grew so much through it, man. Like going to prison, it sucked. It was hard, but I learned so much and I grew in so many ways. And if I would have won that trial, I would have went back to just however my store was ran, living comfortably, buying things from drug addicts, walking into the store and just buying things, no questions asked, and flipping it and selling it on eBay. And I would still be the same guy. And though I am the same guy, I've grown and I've developed a lot because of that pain that I went through. But no, I mean, I would imagine if the one guy that absolutely fabricated and made up that stuff, if somehow he said that he lied, that could help me. But other than that, no, it's because there were things, man, it just got crazy. And there's all these people coming in, and I used to be a drug addict. And so it's I'm not dumb. I can tell these people are on drugs, and God was dealing with my heart, man, but I didn't have the guts to stop buying the brand new in the box stuff because I had employees, and I would have ended up having to fire them, and the business would have ran on for me and my family, but I just didn't have the guts to stop, man. And so, yeah, I'm not a victim. I knew better. I should my spidey senses were always going off when these people came into my store with brand new in the box stuff, and they're acting like addicts. And I just looked at it as man, this is like a pawn shop. It's what happens. So it's what am I supposed to am I supposed to investigate everybody? I can't investigate everybody. So, it's just part of the business. And I just became okay with buying something that could be potentially stolen instead of what I should have been doing. Being who I am and knowing what I know, I should have been doing everything I could to keep stolen stuff out.
Yeah.
Instead of just being okay, this could be stolen, but I don't know, so I'll buy it anyway. And if it's stolen, the cops can come get it. That was my attitude.
How did your wife when you got sentenced? How did she react? What was her mentality through it all?
It was rough, man. It was rough. We went through a really hard time. And like up to the point where I actually went and surrendered, her and I would like argue about stuff. And I stayed in faith the whole time. Um, and I kind of prepared my children for it. And I let them know, I said, hey, I'm going away in a few weeks, because the judge gave me a month to get my affairs in order. And I said, I'm going away in a few weeks and it's going to be really hard. I said, but God is going to bring us back together and everything's going to be awesome again. I said, but I'm going away for a long time, guys, and it's going to be really hard. And as every day got closer, I would tell them, I said, Ziva, Isaiah, that's my children, my son, my daughter and son's name. And I said, guys, I said, I'm leaving in 2 weeks. And then it got down to a week. I said, guys, in a week I'm leaving. And then it was like 5 days, guys, 4 days I'm leaving. It's going to be really hard and we're going to miss each other a lot, but God is going to bring us all back together again and it's going to be awesome. And so I just stayed in faith, but um, it was hard, man. It was real hard. And then going to prison, because I'm changed, man. I'm not a criminal. I wasn't trying to be a criminal when the cops came after me. And so going into prison, I was just already different. Like 9 years earlier, I had already changed my life. So I just didn't join in all the conversations that everybody else did, bragging about all the girls I screw and all the drugs I did and all the things I stole and all the crimes I committed. I just really didn't join in that conversation. And because of that, a lot of the dudes in prison thought that I thought I was better than them or something, man. So a lot of people didn't like me because I'm a family man, and when I went in, I'm not going to change. I'm just going to be me, man. I, I'm not going to change for people. I'm not going to change for the cops. I'm not going to change for the people that I have to live with. Who I am is who I am. And God loves me and accepts me. And I love and I accept me. And I hope that you will. But if you don't, I'm not going to change for you. And so it was rough, man. Got into a few fights and
You
lost the
do the whole
first fight
5
I'd been
years?
in. No, man, I ended up the first step back came through. So I was one of the first people that got that year off. So yeah, I ended up doing 3 years and 3 months. And you know what's crazy about the whole thing? A year before the feds came through, I hired a lawyer to get my record expunged. So I see God's hand on that whole thing. God knew that I wasn't gonna have the guts and stop buying the brand new in the box stuff. So he did everything he could to soften the blow for me. So I was actually able to go through the trial as a first time offender. Dude, if I wouldn't have gotten my criminal record expunged, if I would have been going through federal court as a repeat offender, I would have gotten minimum 15 years, man. 15 years when I wasn't even trying to live. I wasn't even trying to I never set out for my story to become that way. I wasn't but it happened. And you know what? I just decided that I'm going to make the best out of it. Yeah, it's going to suck, but I have faith in a loving God that even when I fail and when I make a mistake, he can turn that around and he can work it for my good and he can bring me out on top. His love and his favor and his blessings on my life never required perfection for me. So whenever I fail, man, I take responsibility. Like I said, I'm not a victim. I see it actually took me getting found guilty before I realized I was guilty. I know it sounds weird. So I take full responsibility for it. And when you do that, God is able to work with it. But when you make excuses and when you blame everybody else for your problems, then you don't really learn from it, man. You make yourself a victim. And I just don't know that God can do a whole lot with that. So I just decided to make the best out of it, man. And I read some books, I learned some stuff, and I decided when I got out, I was going to use my story to inspire other people and let them know it doesn't matter what they're going through. If God is on your side, he can turn away the biggest failure, the biggest mistake, the biggest tragedy, and turn it around for good in your life.
Yeah. So what's going on now in present day? You have a business, right? You do coaching.
I do coaching. I also I'm really involved in my church. I have a men's group that I help lead at my church. I helped start it before I went to prison, and then when I got out, they asked me if I would take it back. So I help lead that, but then I also help with the children on Wednesday nights. So I go in there and I just want to kind of pour into kids' lives and let them know that they're valuable and that they're awesome, whether they're getting told that or not. So hopefully whenever life happens to them, they can remember what I tell them, that they're amazing and they're awesome and that they can do whatever they put their mind to. But yeah, then I have this coaching business. But I'm also helping with another business with my wife. So I'm in the middle of two startups right now. One being my wife's brand image strategy business, kind of like a image coach for people with personal brands. But yeah, man, that and my children. So I really got my wife's back. I was away from my family for so long. I love being a stay-at-home dad. To tell the truth, man, the greatest thing that's ever happened to me in my life is to get to be a father. And so I love taking care of my kids, man. I love children, man. That's kind of like my passion. So I'm just kind of waiting to see what God does next in my life. But in the
Well,
meantime, I'm going to help as many people as I can.
yeah, if you don't mind me asking, for people that are listening that don't know, what kind of coaching do you do? That way, if somebody's listening and they might need to reach out.
The coaching that I'm doing is business coaching. So it's kind of helping people get to that next level, developing systems and processes and stuff like that, kind of with a software to where we can take anybody where they're at. A lot of people are caught up working a job. They thought that they'd be really, because they're good at something, that they'd be able to start this job um, and then everything would be awesome. But all that happens is now they own a job. So they're a slave to their work. So it's kind of helping them develop systems and strategies to where they can start to free up their time and making small incremental changes in different areas of the business. You kind of see that compound to where you can take your bottom line and your profits higher. So it's kind of like business coaching to where I help people increase their profits.
If anybody's listening or watching, you need some coaching. There you go. Let them know where they can find you at, where they can support you and follow you.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook under actually all of my social media is under the Jonathan Field. So I have a YouTube at the Jonathan Field. TikTok is the Jonathan Field, and Facebook, Instagram, all of that. And then I also have a website called sunstonecoaching.com, so you can find me there.
Yeah, we'll put all the links in the description when it releases. And do you ever get people confuse you with the author Jonathan Fields?
Man, that's why everything is under the Jonathan Field, because Jonathan Field is a famous karate guy and he's also a famous horse whisperer. So I don't know about the other Jonathan Field that you're talking about.
Yeah,
I know
there's an
there's a
author that
Jonathan
pops up.
Fields. Yeah, there's a motivational speaker named Jonathan Fields, but no, I haven't gotten confused with any of those guys.
I was just curious if it's hard to find you because there's Jonathan Fields out there.
Yeah, that's why I had to go the Jonathan Field. So I also have a
Um,
website. It's not developed, but my URL is thejonathanfield.com.
there you go. There you go. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on. It's really cool to. That's why I love doing this podcast. To just get to hear people's stories and just kind of see where they came from, where they're at now, and it's really awesome just to hear the just different outcomes from different people's lives, and just to see like where they're at today compared to where they were when active addiction and whatnot. And it just goes to show the power of the mind and the body, and everything. I'm a big firm believer on thoughts become things, and you have the ability, you can pave your own path, and your mind is a powerful thing. And so, it's really cool to see people that are actively walking in that, and just, so no, I appreciate you coming on. It's awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, we do have a powerful mind, but it's also going to take hard work. And a lot of us are just seeking comfort, but you're not going to attain anything in life that really matters if you're not willing to work really hard.
Yeah, no, that's true. Like, I'm sure being in the business you're in, you've read and you've watched The Secret, And there's a spot in there where which I agree with, that's where I got the thoughts become things, and you got to imagine it. But there's a thing in there where it was like, if you go and you sit in the front seat of a red car, you're gonna get a red car if you think you get $10,000. And I'm like, that's nice to think about that, but just like you just hit the nail on the head right there, it also takes hard work and dedication. You just can't think that I'm gonna get $10,000 next week on a check and just fall in your lap.
Yeah, it's taking
It's hard
hard
work.
work. It takes a lot of hard work, and you know that, man. It sounds like you're working really hard. You're up
Yeah.
all night. You're
Yeah.
sacrificing your sleep for this thing, and you know what, man? You're gonna go far.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yep, that's the way I look at it. Is all the hard work will eventually pay off, and I'll meet the right
Absolutely.
people, and things will come, and it'll happen. Until then, we just keep plugging away, keep doing what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Do you have anything before we wrap up? Anything else you want to say?
No, I just want to say, man, it doesn't matter how dark it is and how dark it seems. There is a way out, and you can do it. Don't give up. The difference in me and the guy under the bridge, and the difference in Jared and the guys that are living under the bridge is we decided we didn't want to give up. Those guys gave up a long time ago. And just fight. If you fight for it and if you want it bad enough, it will come. And just because if you fall down and you find yourself relapsing over and over again, keep going. Get back up again. The Bible says that a righteous man falls 7 times, but he gets up again. So just keep getting up. You'll win.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. It doesn't matter how many times you fall. It's how you get back up, and that's the big thing. That's the huge big thing about it. So, um, man, I appreciate you coming on. For those that are listening and watching, go follow Jonathan. Go show him some love. If anybody needs some business advice and coaching, go reach out to him. But thank you so much for coming on, man. That's just gonna wrap up another episode of the Blacklist podcast. Hopefully today's conversation left you feeling inspired and uplifted. And remember, each one of us has the power to spread hope and positivity in our own unique way. If you've enjoyed today's episode and would like to be a part of the journey, here's how you can help. Make sure you follow or subscribe on your favorite platform. Don't hesitate to leave a like and a comment. Every single interaction triggers the algorithm, and it helps us reach people that may need to hear the message of hope. Share with your friends and family. You never know anybody that needs to hear these words. Remember that no matter what life throws your way, there's always a reason to hold on to hope. Until next time, signing off.